The SG Child Show is back for its 13th season. Join Sarah Bradford and the SG Child Show team as they explore the world of autism and share stories of hope and inspiration. This season, we're excited to bring you more autism summits featuring experts and advocates from around the world. Go to sjchilds.org to donate and to get more information. Congratulations on 2024's 20,000 downloads and 300 episodes. Hi, and welcome to the SG Child Show. It's so nice to be here today, and I am joined with Leroy. Leroy, how do I pronounce your last name so that I don't do it any injustice?
Yeah, that's fine. It's Slanzi.
I would have gone right there, so I'd have been
You would,
okay, right?
you would have been
It's so
okay,
nice to
yeah.
meet you. I'm looking forward to uncovering more about what you do, and I read a lot on your profile and website, so I'm really fascinated to get into this conversation. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you here today.
Sure, yeah. Well, first and foremost, I'm a dad. I have two kids. I have a teenager who's in his first year of college this year and a daughter who's in grade 11. So I'm coming to the end of raising kids at home and learning how to raise kids when they're away from home. They're almost a little more needy, I'm finding, as they ask for more money. So, which is great. It's great. My son's doing well, and I'm grateful that I get to support him in his, in his future. And other than that, I'm a principal of an elementary school currently. I've been a principal of elementary, middle, high schools, run the whole gamut. Been at it for about 25 years. I've written a few books. I do a lot of workshops for teachers around emotional intelligence, and I'm trying to reinvigorate, our education system because it's starting to fail in a lot of places all over the world. So
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting. And like you said, all over the world, because I was going to say, how is the school system? How does it differ, if from American, from the USA schools, and what does that look like as far as running the same kind of system, or are we,
Sure.
or the same curriculum style? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, I can speak on behalf of British Columbia because that's where I'm at. Here in Canada, we do have a federal education system, but the provinces have more control over what we do. But in terms of just a general idea, in Canada, we have public school systems, we have independent school systems, we have private school systems, just like you do in the States,
Yep.
just like they do in, Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom. I think that's kind of how it works. And, in the private school systems may be inclined to be more religious or focus on some other stream or characterization that they choose to go down. For example, I'm not in the public system anymore. I actually left 2 years ago. I work for an Indian band, so I work in an Indigenous school.
Oh, wow.
And it's been probably the best move I've ever made in my life. Working with Indigenous people, and I'm learning so much.
Oh, I can imagine.
And it's wonderful because the incorporation of land-based learning, the hands-on type learning into reading, writing, and arithmetic is just amazing. So that's an example. Being an independent school and a public school here in Canada, you do get on the land, but you don't get on the land every day because it costs too much, right? So in that sense, it's the same, I think. I do know, and I don't want to toot our horn up here, I do know that Canada usually ranks in the top 3 in the world in terms of their educational system.
I love that. Please toot your horn. Let's go.
Alberta, our province next door, actually in 2022 ranked number 1 in the world in reading. So I'm kind of ticked at them because I think we were 7. But they are Canadian, so that's okay. But otherwise, I think our systems are the same. And I have a lot of conversations with teachers from the United States, and I interact a lot with superintendents and principals from all over the world. And we're all running into the same issue globally. And that's, the behavior of our kids. And that has shifted drastically, which has come in turn with the digital age we live in.
Isn't that the truth? I think
Mm-hmm.
there's so many multiple facets to that. Environmental, processed foods. There's just a gamut of
Everything.
unfortunate, things that create unhealthy lifestyles, which then breed to unhealthy, minds. And in fact, I have a children's book series, and the tagline is like, healthy minds create healthy futures. And I completely agree with that. And they're about special needs and how to express or share that experience with the typical peers, and how they can better support one another, and really just learn to humanize one another, and recognize that in kindness is where we'll have growth. And that, yeah, all the other stuff just takes a toll and brings us the other direction. So
Yeah, well,
um
that's a beautiful, beautiful book series. I actually have a master's in special ed, so I started my career as a special ed teacher before I became an administrator. So kind of
you
near and
really
dear to my
like
heart
a
there,
lot.
Sarah.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I
Yeah.
have a family of all autistics, and so,
Okay.
and daughter that is and husband that are dyslexic. And so for me, it was really recognizing the injustice, if you will, that they were kind of receiving with people not understanding them in their peer circles. And I didn't know how to bridge that gap or how to really fulfill that for them, which is very personal anyways. But, as a parent, as a super parent, you want to try to get in there and do whatever you can. And
Mm-hmm.
I just felt like when they were really little, kind of expressing to them that, hey, it's okay. There's, we wrote a book about how cool this is and how differences are beautiful and unique and should be widely accepted rather than the other. So, yeah, that was. But hey, we can get not about my books, but
No,
yeah,
hey,
I
no,
want to hear about more about yours. That's so
it's
great.
okay. Well,
Um,
I think you and I
it,
are practicing the same beliefs because, that's one thing that's very important. It has been very important to me over the course of my career is inclusion. And,
yeah,
one of the main arguments, around inclusion, around having kids with special needs in classroom is that they educate the kids around them. I mean, a lot of people will go, well, they should be included in math. They should be included in assemblies. They should be, yeah, of course they should be. There's no, but what they're missing is the power these kids have on developing empathy and kindness in other kids.
mhm.
To the point where my kids are more prone to being kind to the students who have special needs than they are to their classmates, right?
Yeah,
And it comes down to, a lot of it is, it's a visible disability, so there's just that natural caring that comes out. It's like, oh, you know what, they're clearly struggling because I can see it. And so that's where I try to
yeah,
work with kids in schools to have kids also show that kindness and empathy for kids who have that invisible disability as well,
yeah.
and not to make the assumption that just because somebody looks on the surface that they have no struggles, that they actually may. And so the key is to just be kind to everyone and treat
Yep.
everyone the same, right?
Absolutely. And it really, I see we have, kind of in the same way. I have a 25-year-old stepdaughter. So I've finished my in-home parenting for that person. And then, we have a 15-year-old who is, high support needs, and a 13-year-old with very low support needs. So it's very interesting, the range and the spectrum that we get to kind of perceive and support along the way. And I see how the for my son, the school system failed him at the very beginning. At the very beginning, he was hyper lexic. He was uh, reading at 1, writing at 2, and the school was just like, no way. It's, we don't,
Mm-hmm.
when he was in kindergarten, he was, I guess, first grade, he was doing algebra. And of course, I had provided all of these educational tools for him because I saw that he had this love and this want for these things. But the school system, I thought, oh, I can't wait till he goes to school. This is going to be great. He's this is the perfect place for him. And they just said, decline. We cannot teach someone like him on the level that he's at. Sorry. And I was so shocked and in disbelief that I was hearing this, thinking, you all have teaching degrees. I'm sure you went through algebra. Come on, you can get, get them a worksheet off the computer. My heavens. But it wasn't like something that they were open or willing to do for us personally. So I had to come home and homeschool. I did find an online school that was very supportive, that would align with his academic prowess, if you will, and let him take multiple years at a time so that he could be where he wanted and needed to be at. And then I, have my daughter who was in all of the schools, physically and everything. And it wasn't until junior high, kind of, I would say the end of elementary into junior high, that this piece that you're exactly talking about, this emotional wellness and emotional well-being, started to be so affected. And me personally, I said, no way. Like, this part of her is so much more important to me than her writing a book report, doing a science project. Not that I don't want her. I'm going to give, she's going to have education, but at the same breath, I'm not going to allow her to continue to be in these environments that are not changing for the wellness of our children, that they see that it's unwell, but they're still not doing anything about it, even when prompted with ideas or resources or anything else. And it just, it's almost comes to a point where I'm not quite sure how all of these other children are getting along out there. Now that we've brought her home, we're focusing on that emotional well-being. We want that piece to be in place. So if she does want to go back to school someday, that won't be the part that she's struggling with. She'll have that support and maybe self-knowledge or self-confidence, that understanding that the peer kind of judgment isn't necessary.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because listening to you talk about both experiences, they're both the same in the sense of how a school can support children with differing needs, whether it's when they're in kindergarten and it's academic or behavioral, or when they get to middle school, junior high, and it's emotional well-being. And one of the things that is hard for schools is that they are not provided with the proper expertise in terms of how to incorporate kids like that. And schools generally, teachers generally, principals generally, superintendents, they approach teaching like they're fishing with a big net. Let's just say there's 30 fish and they got to catch them all. They'll throw a net in and they'll catch, 26 fish, right, with that one net. And so that's what they're used to doing. And meanwhile, 3 or 4 kids who don't get caught in the net end up suffering, right? And some teachers are getting better at differentiating their instruction so they can adapt, whether it be enriching or modifying academics. Like for your son right there, he needed to be enriched. The problem that I think schools are facing is that because the behavior has shifted so drastically, where we're, as schools, having to deal with behavioral issues in classes that are much more drastic and up and down. And it's just been going on for the last 15 years. So a long time, right? Because of that, it makes it harder for teachers to prep and plan and to differentiate their instruction. And so that's where guys like me need to have, school districts, schools have me come in so we can do an emotional audit of a school where we can examine the mental health of the kids. Sorry, I shouldn't say mental health, emotional intelligence. What we want to do is we want to look at the emotional intelligence of the kids, the emotional intelligence of the staff, of the leadership, of the secretarial staff, just the emotional intelligence of how the school runs. And you can use emotional intelligence to look at the actual structure of a school. So when I look at your son in the primary grades, how was the school structured to support that classroom teacher? It sounds like the school wasn't structured correctly to have him be supported with where he is in math, allowing for that enrichment and to take the pressure off the teacher, because the teacher's putting out fires left, right, and center, just trying to survive. And so that's where I think a lot of principals and a lot of school districts, they don't know how to incorporate an emotionally intelligent structure, organization into their schools while developing personal and professional emotional intelligence in their kids and their staff, if that makes sense. And then if you move on to middle schools, junior highs, etc., yes, schools probably have guidance counselors in them, 2 or 3 guidance counselors for 500 or 600 kids, but they can't have the impact on the kids that they need to, because you'd have to connect with someone like your daughter every day to make sure she's learning the strategies to cope with the mean girl stuff or the pressure and anxiety of maintaining your academics. And again, that's where, somebody like me comes in, helps a school district or helps a school with developing that emotionally intelligent structure and organization, and helping develop that emotional intelligence in the staff and the students. So people like your daughter are, mentally strong enough because they have the emotional intelligence to cope with those barriers and those roadblocks, but also so teachers have a common language and a common understanding of emotions and the science behind it themselves, so they can support from class to class to class, so your daughter's getting the correct support, on top of having a structure or system in place where if she needs to, get out of a class because it's too much or something, she has access to that person who can help her persevere through the rest of the day, build up that stamina and that stability, and grow and gain that strength to go back the next day, right? Yeah. And it's one of those things that it's about thinking outside the box. And unfortunately, we're in this transition phase where social emotional learning and emotional intelligence are not a key pillar in schools. I know it's being brought into schools and it's being thrown at teachers, but they really don't know how to implement it, and they don't know how to embed it and infuse it into what they do every day. And so I think we're getting close. And right now, so what happens when you don't know how to implement, that emotional intelligence component or that social emotional component into your schools, you just fall back to, let's focus on literacy more. Let's focus on numeracy more. Let's enhance our pedagogy and our instructional practices and hope that if we change the way we teach and if we differentiate enough, the kid will grab on, even though they're not going to grab on until they're mentally stable enough or emotionally intelligent enough to cope with the stress of it, right? And so what you're describing is a point in our educational system, which is why I wrote my first book, is that we're on the cusp of this crisis in schools, or, a mental health crisis in our schools. And we have to start making that shift to making sure that the pillars in our school from kindergarten to grade 12 revolve, not just around, reading, writing, and arithmetic, but behavior education as well, that emotional intelligence piece, that social emotional learning piece. Because even as adults, if you're an adult who's not emotionally intelligent, you're going to say or do something stupid that's going to offend people, or, you're not going to think of your neighbor the right way, or be able to, just be accepting and being kind. And a lot of those things, I think, when you can't do those things, it creates division and all kinds of things. And that's hard for kids when they're trying to learn how to be good people growing up and whatnot, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Tell me let's talk about the book. What is the title of the book? Do you have a copy you could show us and hold up or anything with you?
Yeah, I don't know if you can see the
I see it. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, there's all 3 of my books up there. My first book is called Emotional Schools, the Looming Mental Health Crisis and a Pathway Through It. The second book is it's a breathing strategy book that I created to help classroom teachers and parents.
Yeah, I saw that.
To help them co-regulate their children's emotional dysregulation. So it helps them learn to soothe through breathing and being mindful, because that's part of being able to soothe, your dive into the polyvagal nerve and how that affects our whole body, but it helps you calm it. And then my third book, I just actually wrote, it's on leadership. It's called A New Leadership Paradigm Beyond Credentials and the Letters Behind Your Name, because we live in this world where if people have the doctor behind their name or whatnot, and they're a school leader or a superintendent, or if they're in business, that all of a sudden they must be the best at it because they have doctor behind their name. But at the end of the day, the letters behind your name get you in the door, but it doesn't make you a good leader. It doesn't make you somebody who's in it for the right reasons. It doesn't make you somebody who's going to, do right by all of the people in your buildings. And so it's a 3-part series. I'm actually in the middle of writing my 4th book that revolves around the decline in play and how that's, affecting, our kids' ability to persevere and to have that grit and rigor, because they just don't have the ability to go through those trials and tribulations through play that we did when there was no digital age, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I really love that. I love the work you're doing. I think that it's so important. I think that it's the missing piece in so many problems in the education system. And how do you implement, like how would you start to implement that sort of audit onto a school? And how do you gather that information to be able to do that?
Yeah, well, and it's as basic as a questionnaire. An emotional audit is basically, I don't know if you know what a functional behavior assessment is.
Yeah.
Do you know what one of those is? Yeah, I'm sure you do. So it's the same idea where basically, a teacher or a kid will answer a series of questions. They'll put 1 to 5 on a scale of 1 to 5. It feels like this, feels like that. And at the end, it'll spit out a result that says, okay, your emotional intelligence is average, very good, or, below average. I wouldn't use the word horrible, but you know what I mean? And so what it does is it gives us a pinpoint, because the last thing you want to do is you don't want to walk into a school that's average and treat them like they're below average. You want to build on where schools are at, right? And same with kids. If you have kids that are, are strong in terms of their social emotional well-being, their ability to regulate, their ability to manage their emotions and not become victims to their feelings, like you want to basically be able to start kids in schools where they're at. And then from there, you want to introduce a common language. You want to teach them how to embed using emotionally intelligent language into everything they do. So at every time there's a behavioral issue, you refer to the common language and you refer to the strategy of breathing and being mindful for them to get through and cope through that stressor with some co-regulation with the teacher when they're really young. And as they get older, it's more of a reminder. It's like, hey, dude, take some deep breaths. I know this math test is tough. I know your university entrance requirement is going to weigh heavily on how you do on this test, but let's take some deep breaths. Let's be mindful. Let's be in the moment. Remember that common language we've been learning. Remember that we can do it. And you just in the moment of when people are experiencing those emotional difficulties, it's basically when you have that common language and you have that ingrained into your system, it becomes I don't want to say, I don't take religion out of this, but I'll say it becomes their Bible of how to be emotionally intelligent. It gives them that, this is my go-to. Okay, I'm feeling like this. It's like, as adults, I can call somebody that I know I can lean on, or there's certain quotes that I can read, or I know I can take some deep breaths or go for a walk, or I have strategies that I use to kind of soothe my mind, soothe my soul, so I'm in a good place. And it's about developing those things at an early age. And at the early ages, like in primary school, elementary school, middle school, you use play to help elicit emotions, to teach kids to self-soothe and self-regulate. And as kids get into the high school era, it's more word-based and it's more acting on in the moment, being reactive to when they're feeling disgruntled or having difficulties, and giving them the tools and reminders of breathing and being mindful. And, and if you look at society as a whole, there's a massive industry around helping adults with their mental health, around helping adults deal with stress and surviving their jobs and friendships and marriages and financial situations. And a lot of it revolves around being able to calm yourself so you can think, right? And if you
Yeah.
can think, then you can make the right decisions and you don't go down rabbit holes. And so really it's about, early on using play, reincorporating free and structured play back into your schools to help, guide kids through learning about breathing and mindfulness. And then as you progress, that becomes ingrained and they learn how to do it on their own. And then as you get into the high schools and whatnot, it's about having teachers trained and students trained and reminded about emotional intelligence and what tools they have in their toolbox that they develop from elementary schools. And then as you go along too, and as I do these workshops that I'm working with elementary, middle school, and high schools, I'm training teachers as well. So it not only helps them help kids, but it helps them with their own personal lives. So
Yeah.
it's really, I mean, the workshops I do are 5 hours long. So trying to explain it in a 2-minute, 3-minute podcast, but I think you get the idea of it, right? It's about
Yeah.
implementing,
I love it.
emotional intelligence strategies, doing an audit so you're not wasting time starting up at a place you don't need to with some, because I go into schools and they're toxic, and you got to start
Mhm.
from basic. Then I'll go into schools and it's like, wow, you guys are doing great. And some schools will come to me. It's like, yeah, we're here. We're on the cusp. I think our academics could be, our kids are C+ kids. We want them A and Bs. I'm like, okay, let me come in at that level. Here's how we attack it. And let's get them to
Right.
A's and B's. Let's develop that rigor. Let's develop that grit and perseverance, right? Whereas other schools, you're going way back and just teaching them how to play without getting into a fight with each other.
Yeah.
Right? Does that make sense? And so that's the emotional audit piece, which kind of gives you a baseline of where to start.
So, was there like one specific thing that happened that was like the aha moment for you that this is what I'm going to do to change this? Was there anything specific? I'm thinking, I'm hoping there's a good story behind that.
Yeah, it was kind of a gradual aha. So I started 25 years ago, and I started my career it was called a foundational class. It's back in the day they used to stream kids who had special needs, kids with behaviors. They put them all into one class, right? And they wouldn't include them. So I always worked with kids that were vulnerable and at risk. And so, which was fine. I figured it out. I quite enjoyed it. I had the EA support. I was disappointed that my kids couldn't be included in things. And eventually, within 3 or 4 years, society shifted, school system shifted, and kids began to be more included. And the trouble kind of started to come when, we started being more inclusive with kids, but there wasn't the funding to support them with education, EA, education assistance or special ed assistance, or the dollars for more programs, or the funding to have a higher special ed teacher. And so, but eventually that got better too. It's still a problem. But what started to happen about 10, 15 years ago is the sleep deprivation. With the onset of the digital age, it was more, I had more and more kids coming in, falling asleep in class, being disinterested in school, and teaching became harder and harder. We had to get more and more creative with how we taught. And the more creative we got, it just seemed like the less interested kids were. And a lot of that is because, video games, when a kid plays a video game, they get a dopamine hit, a reward every 5 seconds. So you can imagine a teacher trying to teach, kids sentence structure with a predicate and a subject, and to capitalize this and put a period on that, which takes 15 minutes with a 15-minute lesson, right? And you can see kids just kind of go, right? And so it kind of started there. And then from there, I was like, okay, there's something happening. And then from there, it kind of shifted into this, kids all of a sudden freaking out or having tantrums or being unable to deal with small stressors, like their pencil breaks and all of a sudden they're flipping a desk, or just not being able to tolerate an adult being the authoritarian in a room, and all of a sudden they're pushing back with a disrespectful way, which then I think ties into not only the digital age, but in this age where all of a sudden the nuclear family is one where both parents have to go to work. Right. And so then you have this situation where both parents are working. So kids now are not only playing video games, but they're being raised by whatever they're seeing on social media. So, it was kind of that moment with sleep deprivation, these kids' inability to handle small stressors. And that's where I was like, and it was like I said, it was probably about 10 or 15 years ago. And then, we're kind of plugging through, doing our best, fighting the fight. And then all of a sudden COVID hits. And then now you have kids aren't going to school, and everybody's trying to teach kids online. Well, if kids could learn online, they'd all be in online learning and being homeschooled and not in schools. Parents aren't teaching. I was a principal and I struggled having my kids at home. I actually went, I can't do this. Do you know what I mean?
I don't know how I do some days.
Well, that's
and I don't
right?
some days, that's the thing.
That's the thing. And so, and then now, so we're in this epidemic actually worldwide. Not only is there behavioral issues because kids can't cope with the smallest of stressors and because they're sleep deprived, we're also seeing attendance right around the world as a huge problem. Kids aren't coming to school anymore. Like, kids are just like, I don't want to go to school. I want to sleep in. And parents trying to get ready for work and whatnot, and they don't want to have the fight and they don't want to battle taking the phone away. And so we have this perfect storm of parents having to work, not wanting to fight the social media battle. Parents are also getting addicted to technology and being on their phones too much, which means they're not playing as much with their kids. Parents are afraid to send their kids outside because they're afraid they're going to get kidnapped or hurt. So that free play where kids learn those skills is gone. Yeah. To go join a swim club or a gymnastics team or play community soccer, the cost of those things has gone through the roof. So, the structured play costs too much money. And then even in schools here in Canada, we're seeing, even in high schools, our basketball programs, our volleyball programs, we're seeing less and less tournaments, less and less, because schools can't afford it because the funding's not there. And I wished, schools would realize and school districts would realize, like, hey, we need to dump some money into things like drama and fine arts and sports, because that's what kids are passionate about. And that's what helps the behavior. And that's what keeps them coming to school. But instead, they keep spinning their wheels and dumping money into numeracy and literacy and assessment practices and, all these things. And they're not getting to the root of what has to happen with social emotional learning / emotional intelligence, because that's the key to the shift is having a group of kids and teachers and parents understand their own emotions so they can do the right thing, right? And so yeah, I mean, to make a short answer long or a long answer short, it started with sleep deprivation, and it's like that snowball going down a hill. And it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, exacerbated by COVID.
That's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And in a sense, our family went through kind of like a tiny micro version of that with the sleep, kind of a sleep patterns that I finally, at some point after my son would sleep all of the time during his, therapy sessions, I finally started to recognize, like, I can't keep putting him to sleep with melatonin every night. This isn't working. Mm-hmm. Like, I started tracking and watching his actual sleep schedule and letting him just naturally go to sleep when he needed to and wake up. And I really started to follow that. And I was able to, because I was home, at home with him. Mm-hmm. But what a difference it has made in our life. I mean, it's been maybe 8 years now, so it's been a very long time. But he sleeps like the moon every 2 weeks in the night, every 2 weeks during the day, and it wasn't anything, the rest of our family doesn't. My husband does a kind of a version of that, is why I finally recognized and said, wait a second, I need to look at this a little bit more clearly. But for
genetics
him,
matter.
And I just really had to follow that somatic, kind of answers he was showing me and just say, okay, I have to follow this. And it doesn't make sense for society. It doesn't make sense for a lot of, for his educational schedule. But luckily, like, again, I could make that work in different ways. But overall now, he's he's still working on reciprocative language and things. There's a lot of work to go, of course, but his actual, like, health and, like, life, he doesn't get upset hardly ever. It's very, very few and far between that he is upset. And I mean, we would get upset going to the grocery store, getting into the car, getting out of the car, getting, every transition was upsetting. So I'm really,
which is pretty typical with kids who have autism. Transitions I have
hard.
1,000 kids with autism, and every one of them has had an issue with a transition, right? It's just something that's like, okay, we're about to switch. And that's where timers come in. It's like, Let me tell you, half an hour beforehand, I'm going to set a timer because just so
Yep.
you know, right? And if
And
you
now
don't,
he
oh
sets his
boy, yeah,
own. Now he controls his own alarms and his own timers and his own. I give him,
yeah.
this is when something's going to happen. He's ready. He's got his shoes on. He's at the front door. He's ready to go. He's like, everything has been so much easier when I've really recognized to follow both of my children's kind of their own patterns and not try to force or change them into something that works for me. And I know that's really hard for parents to hear or parents to identify or even imagine that they wouldn't control every moment of their child's life to be like theirs. But my husband and I just really kind of embraced the sense that, hey, if we can just kind of grow this plant in the in the right sunlight that it needs, not where we think it looks best, and kind of things, then think different things will happen. And we really have. And it's shown us such a much more positive, successful way of being the parents to them. Whoops, and whatever that means. I don't know what that was. But yeah, it's amazing how just kind of that giving into, I think, being emotionally intelligent ourselves and
Hmm.
recognizing that their needs and their well-being is so important. They can learn and get all of the books and have all of the math problems and everything in their lifetime. That's not going to be something they're going to miss. But they are going to miss having, these moments where we can sit down and have these conversations, these deep, meaningful conversations about what we do with our emotions and how we manage them and how we treat others when we are upset or things like that. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, it's definitely like this beautiful learning roller coaster.
Yeah, well, you know what? You just nailed on the middle school, high school component of emotional intelligence. So you outlining those conversations, like you just outlined very clearly of what we do when we do this, how we do that. Like you just listed a bunch of strategies. And could you imagine if every teacher responded to kids the same way you just talked about? And that takes a common language, right? And that's
Yeah,
where, I come in with the common language. Here you go. Here's a common language. You can see these colored posters. These are the key concepts
I
around
love
that.
that.
Yeah, and so, but having that and knowing as a parent, that as socials, English, math, science, French teacher. Oh, you guys don't take French down there, probably. That's a Canadian thing. Spanish, maybe. But but knowing that when they're in high school, because they have, if they're in a semester system, they have 4 teachers, sometimes 5 or 6 with electives. That each teacher can guide your kids towards having that open dialogue around, okay, let's be emotionally intelligent here. This is, what are you feeling? How are you feeling? And why are you feeling it? And how do we fix it? And knowing every teacher will have that conversation because they have access to something that
Yes.
guides them to helping kids. Because that's what's missing right now is teachers don't
Right.
have that thing that guides them to accessing
Mhm.
that. And literally, so instead of saying to a kid, just get out of my class, go to the office. Instead
Yes.
of doing that, which then could turn into get out in the hallway, let me go have a conversation for a minute, 2 minutes. Instead of that, saying, hey, you know what? Look at that blue poster up there. That's this. This is what you're feeling. Remember that? Take some deep breaths. You got this. And to have that, and then that kid being reinforced every class, all day, every day by
Yes.
5, 6, 7 adults plus at home, it's a game changer, right? And to make you feel better, I let my kids at school sleep. I have every day I'll have a kid fall asleep on a couch in my, because I don't have a principal's office. I have a calming space where they
Mm.
come in and they'll sleep for an hour or
Love
two.
that.
I'll wake them up after an hour. So it's better than forcing them to try to stay awake and not learning
100%.
or getting into a fight with them or sending them home. I'd rather,
Yes.
come and sleep for an hour. Let's get you back and pick up where you're at. And that's
Yeah.
what I do, because there's no point fighting it like we did 15 years ago, saying, you know what, I'm going to call your parents, you need to get to bed, because it just doesn't happen that way, right?
Yeah.
And so now I
Absolutely.
just work around their circadian rhythms, and we go from there. It's a better place for it.
Love it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
completely agree with that. Oh, this has
Yeah.
been such a great conversation. I'm just so happy that we connected, and I hope that we can stay in touch because I think that there's a lot we could share and learn and
For sure.
teach
Yeah.
others between what you and I have going on. That's wonderful. Tell us where we can go to find out more information about you, where my listeners and viewers can go to reach out to you if they'd like to get in touch. I know know, there are quite a few teachers and hopefully some principals that might be listening. So hopefully we will take advantage of this wonderful information. Where can we go to find out more?
They can just go to leroyslanzi.com.
Wonderful.
Yeah, they can go to I'm in the process of evolving into a different website and stuff. That's about 3 or 4 months of the way. But right now, leroyslanzi.com, it has my contact information on there. There's a phone number. You can also email me at leroyslanzi@gmail.com. And I have no problem getting on a phone call, doing a consultation, see where you're at. And that's all free, by the way. There's no money being charged until there's an actual contract signed with me going into a school. But I'm here to have a conversation. Like, I get teachers emailing me all the time saying, this is what I'm feeling, this is what's going on. And I end up, free of charge. Sometimes I'm like, God, I do have a teacher consultant business, but I'm terrible at it because I never charge. I'm just always like, because I get excited and I want to help. Right. So they can go to my website, they can email me, and I'm here for parents and teachers, and, as much as I can be.
Well, it's been such a wonderful time to have this conversation with you. I hope that we can stay in touch, and please keep doing this amazing work you're doing. I hope that somebody in the United States can also pursue the same. So we
I can come to the United States. There's no
come on down.
I know there's a lot of chaos going down in your world, but my sister works in California, so I think I'll be safe to come down there. There's visas and permits. I can come down to present and stuff. So you can bring me down. It's all good.
That sounds so great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and I'm really looking forward to staying in touch.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Shining bright, stories of love and courage all throughout the night. Her voice resonating, an anthem for all through the trials and the trials. She answers the call, a mother and a fighter, breaking barriers in stride. With love as her guide, she'll never hide. She's changing the world for you, with a heart that's fierce and strong. Empathy's a melody. Journey we all belong. Followers gather like stars in the night, so bright. 44,000 voices sharing in the light. She stands for family, advocates for more. A movement of compassion, ways will soar. Podcast together, a symphony of support. Creating life, changing rapport. She's changing the world for you, with a heart that's fierce and strong. Empathy's a melody, a journey